The gunshot echoed across the plains as Nora Keller fired a warning shot into the darkening sky, her trembling hands struggling to steady the revolver that had belonged to her late husband. The gathering storm clouds mirrored the turmoil in her heart as she stood on the porch of her isolated homestead, 30 miles outside of Willow Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1876. 3 years a widow, and still the emptiness of Daniel's absence felt as raw as the day they'd laid him in the cold ground. Wind whipped across the prairie, bending the tall grass in violent waves as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Nora hurried inside, bolting the door behind her. The small cabin creaked and groaned under the assault of the brewing tempest. Just yesterday, she'd spotted riders on the horizon, strangers, not townsfolk, and in these parts, strangers often meant trouble. Nora stoked the fire, her gaze drifting to the framed photograph on the mantel. Daniel's serious face stared back at her, a face she'd once thought would grow old alongside hers. 26 was too young to be widowed, too young to face the frontier alone. The storm intensified, rain hammering against the roof like 1,000 angry fists. Thunder cracked, making the windows rattle in their frames. Nora pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, fighting the urge to weep. These moments of weakness always came with the storms, maybe because the noise drowned out her sobs, allowing her a rare moment to release the grief she carried silently. A sharp knock at the door cut through the tempest's howl, startling Nora from her thoughts. She froze, heart hammering against her ribs. Who would be out in such weather? The knock came again, more urgent this time. With shaking hands, she retrieved Daniel's revolver from the mantel, checking the chamber's 5 bullets remained. She approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" she called, trying to sound stronger than she felt. "Madam, I don't mean to intrude," came a deep voice, strained against the wind's fury. "My name's Yates Blackwell. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back. I'm seeking shelter until this storm passes, if you'd be so kind." Nora hesitated, weighing her options. Turning away a traveler in such weather could mean sentencing them to death, but opening her door to a stranger could be equally dangerous. "I've got a rifle, madam," the voice added, seeming to sense her apprehension. "I'll gladly leave it on the porch if that would make you feel safer." Something in the sincerity of his voice made Nora's decision. "Place your weapons on the railing and step back," she instructed. After a moment, she heard the clatter of metal against wood. She unbolted the door, opening it just enough to peek through, revolver ready. A tall figure stood several paces back, hands raised in peaceful surrender. Lightning flashed, illuminating a weather-beaten face beneath a soaked Stetson. The man was drenched to the bone, water streaming from his long duster coat. Nora opened the door wider, gesturing with the revolver. "Come in, but no, I'm not afraid to use this." The stranger Yates nodded respectfully and stepped inside. Water puddled around his boots as he removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. Nora judged him to be in his early 30s, with a face that had seen its share of sun and hardship. "Much obliged, madam," he said, his voice a gentle rumble that somehow cut through the storm's noise. "I won't be any trouble." "You can hang your coat by the fire," Nora instructed, maintaining her distance, revolver still pointed in his general direction. "There's a stool there. Sit." Yates complied without argument, removing his sodden duster and hanging it carefully. As he moved into the firelight, Nora noticed a long scar running along his jawline and eyes the color of whiskey that reflected the dancing flames. "You have a name, madam?" he asked, settling onto the stool. Nora Keller." She lowered the revolver slightly but kept it in hand. "This is my husband's property." Yates glanced around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the single bed in the corner, the distinct lack of a man's presence. "He out in this weather." A lump formed in Nora's throat. "He's been gone 3 years. Fever took him." Understanding softened Yates's expression. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Keller." Thunder cracked directly overhead, making the cabin shudder. Nora flinched involuntarily and Yates pretended not to notice, his gaze fixed politely on the fire. "Where you headed, Mr. Blackwell?" she asked, trying to sound conversational rather than suspicious. "Yates, please." He rubbed his hands together near the fire. "I'm on my way to Sweetwater. Got a job waiting at a ranch there. That's still 2 days' ride in good weather," he nodded. "I was hoping to make it to Willow Creek by nightfall, but this storm had other ideas." Nora's stance eased slightly. His story seemed plausible enough. "Many drifters pass through these parts, moving between seasonal ranch work. Are you hungry?" she found herself asking, surprised by her own hospitality. "I wouldn't want to impose. It's just stew, nothing fancy." Nora set the revolver on the table, though still within easy reach, and moved to the iron pot hanging over the fire. "I always make too much anyway." As she ladled the stew into a bowl, she felt Yates's eyes on her, not predatory or threatening, but curious, perhaps even admiring. It had been so long since a man had looked at her that way that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. "Thank you kindly," he said as she handed him the bowl. Their fingers brushed momentarily, and Nora pulled back as if burned, unsettled by the small spark of electricity the contact had ignited. They ate in silence, broken only by the howling wind and thunder. The storm showed no signs of abating, rain pounding mercilessly against the roof and windows. "Looks like we're in for a long night," Yates observed, setting aside his empty bowl. "This is quite a place you've got here, Mrs. Keller." "Managing it alone can't be easy." Nora stared into the fire. "Nothing about this life is easy, Mr. Blackwell. No, I don't imagine it is." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "How do you manage the livestock, the fields?" "I hire help when I can afford it, trade with neighbors." She lifted her chin slightly. "I make do." Yates nodded, respect evident in his gaze. "That takes courage." "It takes necessity," Nora corrected, though his words warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. "What about you? Always been a ranch hand?" A shadow crossed his features. "No, not always. After the war, I tried my hand at many things, drove cattle up from Texas for a spell, worked security for the railroad, even tried mining in Colorado." "You fought in the war?" Yates nodded. "Union Army, 11th Illinois Cavalry." Nora studied him with new interest. Daniel had been too young for the war, just 16 when it ended. This man had lived through something her husband never experienced. A particularly violent gust rattled the shutters, and suddenly the cabin plunged into semi-darkness as the wind extinguished one of the oil lamps. Nora moved to relight it, but Yates was quicker, striking a match and carefully bringing the flame back to life. "Thank you," she murmured, suddenly aware of his proximity, the faint scent of leather and pine that clung to him despite the rain. "My pleasure, Mrs. Keller." "Nora," she corrected, surprising herself again. "If we're going to be storm-bound together, you might as well call me Nora." A genuine smile transformed his weathered face. "Nora it is, then." The storm continued its assault, and as the hours passed, Nora found herself relaxing in Yates's company. He told stories of his travels, the vastness of the Texas plains, the majesty of the Colorado mountains, the bustling energy of St. Louis. His words painted pictures that transported her beyond the confines of her lonely existence. "Have you ever thought of leaving?" he asked during a lull in conversation. "Starting fresh somewhere else?" Nora looked around the cabin at the life she and Daniel had built. "This was our dream." "I can't just abandon it. Dreams can change," Yates said gently. "They have to sometimes." Before she could respond, a tremendous crash shook the cabin, followed by the sound of splintering wood. They both jumped to their feet as water began pouring through a new hole in the corner of the roof. "Damn it!" Nora rushed to salvage the quilts on her bed, which was directly beneath the breach. Yates was already moving, dragging the heavy trunk from the foot of the bed to the other side of the cabin. "Get anything else valuable away from this corner," he instructed, then grabbed a bucket. "Where do you keep your tools?" "Shed out back," Nora answered, gathering armfuls of clothing and personal items. Without hesitation, Yates pulled his duster back on. "I'll be right back." You'll be soaked through. Already was once today, he called over his shoulder, then disappeared into the storm. Nora scrambled to move everything away from the spreading puddle, her heart racing with anxiety. The hole was getting bigger by the minute, chunks of the roof giving way under the rain's assault. She grabbed pots and pans, placing them strategically to catch the worst of the leaks. True to his word, Yates returned moments later, drenched and carrying an armful of tools and a small tarp. Without wasting time, he dragged the table beneath the hole and climbed up, working quickly to secure the tarp from the inside. "This won't hold forever," he shouted over the storm, "but it should get us through the night." Nora handed him nails as he needed them, watching his capable hands work with practiced efficiency. Within 20 minutes, the makeshift repair was complete. The leak had slowed to a manageable drip, which Nora contained with a large pot. Yates climbed down from the table, his clothes soaked and his hair plastered to his head. Despite his bedraggled appearance, Nora was struck by how handsome he looked in the lamplight, his strong features animated with the satisfaction of a job well done. "Thank you," she said, handing him a towel. "I don't know what I would have done without your help. You'd have figured something out." He toweled his hair. "You strike me as a woman who always does." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who understood hardship and survival. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken possibilities. A violent shiver broke the spell as Yates's body reacted to his wet clothing. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Nora said practically, turning to a trunk in the corner. "I think I have some of Daniel's things that might fit you." She returned with a simple shirt and pants. "They might be a bit small, but they're dry." Yates accepted them gratefully. "Thank you, I'll just—" He glanced around the one-room cabin, realizing there was nowhere to change privately. Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'll turn my back," she said, moving to face the fire. She listened to the rustle of fabric, the soft thud of wet clothes hitting the floor, trying desperately not to imagine the man behind her. It had been so long since she'd been this aware of a man's presence. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. "Decent now," Yates announced after a few minutes. Nora turned to find him standing awkwardly in Daniel's old clothes, which indeed strained at the shoulders but otherwise fit reasonably well. He'd hung his wet things near the fire to dry. "Better?" she asked. "Much, thank you." The storm continued to rage outside, but inside a different kind of tension was building, not unpleasant, but unfamiliar and exhilarating. Nora busied herself making coffee, needing something to occupy her hands. "It's going to be a long night," she said, glancing at her now damp bed. "I can make a pallet on the floor for myself. You take the bed." "Absolutely not," Yates objected. "I'll take the floor. I've slept on worse, believe me. But you're my guest." "An uninvited one," he reminded her with a small smile. "The floor is fine, Nora, truly." They compromised by arranging dry blankets on the floor near the fire. Nora insisted on giving him one of her pillows, which he accepted with gracious thanks. As they sat drinking coffee, the cabin grew quieter, the storm finally beginning to lose some of its fury. "May I ask about your husband?" Yates ventured cautiously. Nora's hands tightened around her mug. Normally, such a question from a stranger would have seemed intrusive, but tonight, with rain drumming on the roof and the wind whistling through the cracks, it felt natural. "Daniel was 25 when he died," she began softly. "We'd been married for years. He was kind, hardworking. Had big dreams for this place." She gestured around the cabin. "The fever came on suddenly. 3 days later, he was gone." Yates listened quietly, his expression compassionate but not pitying. "The first year was the hardest," Nora continued, surprised by how easily the words came. "Learning to do everything alone, facing each sunrise knowing he wouldn't be there." She took a shaky breath. "It gets easier, but it never gets easy." "Grief is like that," Yates agreed. "It changes shape but never really leaves." Something in his tone made Nora look up sharply. "You've lost someone too," he nodded, gazing into the fire. My wife, Elizabeth, and our baby daughter. Childbirth 7 years ago. I'm so sorry, Nora whispered, reaching out instinctively to touch his hand. The connection felt both foreign and familiar, like remembering how to do something long forgotten. That's why I keep moving, Yates admitted. Staying in one place means building something permanent, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that again. I understand, Nora said, and she truly did. Sometimes I think about selling this place, starting over somewhere new, but then it feels like I'd be leaving Daniel behind for good. He's not in this land, Nora, Yates said gently. He's in your heart. That doesn't change no matter where you go. His words touched something deep inside her, a truth she'd been afraid to acknowledge. Maybe holding on to this place wasn't honoring Daniel's memory, maybe it was just another way of avoiding the future. As if sensing her thoughts, Yates turned his hand over, clasping hers. It's a scary thing, moving forward, but we do it one day at a time. The simple touch of his hand around hers sent warmth spreading through Nora's body. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt human connection like this, honest, understanding, without expectation or demand. Outside, the storm was subsiding, the rain softening to a gentle patter. Inside, something new was brewing, fragile and tentative, but undeniably real. It's late, Nora said eventually, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. We should get some sleep. They prepared for bed with the awkward politeness of strangers forced into intimate proximity. Nora changed into her nightgown behind a screen while Yates made up his pallet on the floor. When she emerged, he was already stretched out, staring at the ceiling. "Good night, Yates," she said, climbing into her bed, which was mercifully only slightly damp in one corner. "Good night, Nora," he replied, "and thank you for your hospitality." Sleep came slowly for Nora, her mind replaying their conversations, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands as he worked to fix her roof. Just as she was drifting off, a particularly loud crack of thunder jolted her awake. She gasped, sitting upright. "It's all right," came Yates's voice from the darkness, "just the storm's last hurrah." "I've never liked storms," Nora confessed, her heart still racing. Daniel used to, she stopped herself, suddenly self-conscious. "Used to what?" Yates prompted gently. Nora swallowed. "He used to hold me." Until it passed. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken emotions. Then the sound of movement and Yates's silhouette appeared beside her bed. "May I?" he asked simply, extending his hand. Nora hesitated only briefly before nodding, moving over to make room. Yates sat on the edge of the bed, then carefully stretched out beside her on top of the covers. His strong arm encircled her shoulders, drawing her gently against his side. "Like this?" he whispered. Nora nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The steady beat of his heart beneath her ear was the most comforting sound she'd heard in years. They lay together, not speaking, as the storm gradually receded into the distance. Nora felt the tension leaving her body, replaced by a peaceful drowsiness. "Better," Yates murmured, his voice rumbling in his chest. "Better," she agreed, her eyes growing heavy. In the last moments before sleep claimed her, Nora realized she was smiling, truly smiling for the first time in 3 long years. Morning arrived with brilliant sunshine that streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the golden light. Nora woke slowly, disoriented by the weight of an arm across her waist, the unfamiliar warmth of a body behind hers. For one disorienting moment, she thought Daniel had returned to her. Reality rushed back as she turned carefully to find Yates still sleeping, his face relaxed and younger looking in repose. Sometime during the night, he'd moved under the covers, and they'd shifted into this intimate embrace. She should feel scandalized, Nora thought, but instead she felt safe. His eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. He immediately withdrew his arm. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough with sleep. "I didn't mean to, it's all right," Nora assured him, finding she meant it. "Thank you for staying." They rose and prepared breakfast together, moving around the small cabin with a surprising ease, as if they'd done this dance many times before. Outside, the world was washed clean by the storm, the prairie gleaming under the morning sun. "I should get going," Yates said as they finished eating. "Need to find my horse and continue to Sweetwater." Nora nodded, ignoring the disappointment that settled in her chest. "Of course." He changed back into his now dry clothes, returning Daniel's with thanks. Nora packed him food for the journey, waving away his protests. "At least let me pay you for your hospitality," Yates insisted, reaching for his money pouch. "Absolutely not," Nora said firmly. "You fixed my roof, consider us even." When the time came to say goodbye, they stood awkwardly on the porch, neither quite knowing how to end this unexpected interlude in their lives. "I'll come back this way," Yates finally said. "After I finish the job in Sweetwater, if that would be all right with you." Hope fluttered in Nora's chest. "I'd like that." He reached out, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips in a gesture that belonged to another time and place. "Thank you, Nora Keller, for sheltering me from the storm." As she watched him walk away, Nora felt something shift inside her like the first thaw after a long winter. Painful in its intensity but promising renewal. True to his word, Yates returned 6 weeks later, riding up to her homestead on a fine afternoon in early summer. Nora spotted him from the garden, her heart leaping at the familiar silhouette against the sky. She wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "You came back," she said as he dismounted. "I said I would." His smile was warm, his eyes taking in the sight of her as if committing her to memory. That visit lasted 3 days, during which Yates helped repair fences, reinforced the roof properly, and shared stories that made Nora laugh for the first time in years. When he left, the goodbye was harder, the promise to return more meaningful. He came again a month later, staying for a week. This time, when he prepared to leave, Nora found the courage to reach for him, drawing his face down to hers for a hesitant kiss that quickly deepened into something neither of them had expected to find again. "I'm falling in love with you, Nora Keller," Yates confessed against her lips. "I didn't come looking for that, but here it is." "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know if I can survive losing someone again. None of us has guarantees," he said, stroking her cheek, "but I'd rather spend whatever time we have together than apart." By autumn, Yates had sold his belongings and moved permanently to Nora's homestead. Together, they expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and enlarging the kitchen. Nora's neighbors, initially skeptical of the newcomer, warmed to him as they saw the positive changes in both the property and in Nora herself. They were married the following spring in a simple ceremony in Willow Creek's small church. Nora wore a new blue dress, and Yates wore a suit that made him look uncomfortable but handsome. As they exchanged vows, Nora felt Daniel's presence not as a ghost haunting her present, but as a cherished part of her past who would always hold a place in her heart. That night, as another spring storm raged outside their improved and leak-free home, Nora lay in Yates's arms, marveling at life's unexpected turns. "A year ago, I sat alone during storms, missing what I'd lost," she murmured against his chest. "Now I almost welcome them." Yates tightened his arms around her. "Why is that?" "Because they brought you to me," she said simply. "And now, instead of reminding me of what's gone, they remind me of what I found." "What we found," he corrected, kissing her forehead. "A second chance neither of us was looking for." The years that followed brought challenges, as frontier life always did: drought seasons, harsh winters, the constant work of maintaining a homestead. But they also brought joy. The birth of their son the following year, whom they named Samuel after Yates's father, the addition of more livestock that turned their modest homestead into a proper ranch, and the deep, abiding love that grew stronger with each passing season. 5 years after that fateful storm, Nora sat on their expanded porch watching Yates teaching 4-year-old Samuel to ride his first pony. Their second child, a daughter named Clara, napped inside, just 8 months old and already showing her mother's determination. Willow Creek had grown into a proper town, with a school where Nora taught 3 days a week. The Blackwell Ranch had prospered under their joint care, becoming one of the more successful operations in the county. Life wasn't perfect, nothing ever was on the frontier, but it was full and rich in ways Nora had once thought forever beyond her reach. That evening, as they put the children to bed, Nora caught Yates looking at her with such tenderness it still made her breath catch. "What?" she asked, smiling under his gaze. "Just thinking about how lucky that storm was," he said, pulling her close. "The one that stranded me here." "I think we made our own luck after that," Nora replied, leaning into his embrace. "Storm or no storm, I believe we would have found each other somehow." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, heralding another approaching storm. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they were exactly where they needed to be, sheltered together until it passed and beyond.